They say the first thing you forget is the sound of your own breathing. I remember mine like a metronome, too loud, too close, stuttering against the thin plaster of the room the night I shouldn't have been awake. My name doesn't matter here. Names are thin things, easily scraped off by whatever I woke that night. What matters is how a single poster on a wall can change the way the world pays attention to you. I found it in the attic of the house I was house-sitting. A horizontal print, almost cinematic, the left side a slab of weathered red letters that read like a command, "Don't look," and the right side a face. Not a portrait, not a person I could explain. The skin was the color of old paper, the eyes milky and flat as river stones, and the lips curled into a smile that smelled like rust and wet cloth. It hung above an old trunk, lit by the moon through a gap in the eaves. When I stepped closer, the hairs along my forearm prickled, as if someone had whispered my secrets into my skin. At first, I told myself it was just art, propaganda from some forgotten theater group, a cheap thrill for a collector. I told myself a lot of things that night to keep the ordinary world glued to me. I put my hand on the frame and felt a chill deeper than winter. The temperature around it dropped. My breath came out in quick, visible slashes. The candle on the trunk guttered, though there was no draft. A smell rose, old incense, like a church that had been closed too long, and underneath it, a damp, mineral tang that made my molars ache. I tried to laugh. The sound snapped like a dry twig. The room seemed to pull at the edges of my vision, as if the darkness were tightening a belt. Then the poster moved. Not a flicker, not the trick of light, but a slow, deliberate shift, as if whatever it depicted were tilting its head to consider me. I left the attic and told myself to go back in the morning and sleep, real sleep, would make it a bad dream. But the house had memory. In the hallway, the floorboards complained in voices that sounded suspiciously like breathing. Downstairs, the old radio in the parlor, long disconnected, hissed like a kettle, and then, improbably, played a single bar of a hymn warped into a child's wail. I tried to pin meaning to those things. Rodents, pipes, a trick of my tired brain. Each rational explanation was a bandage on a wound that kept widening. I lay in the guest room, aware of the poster as if it had settled itself on the opposite wall of my skull, and listened to silence stretch into something that could be felt, like the pressure before a storm. When the house finally went quiet enough that I could hear my heart again, I realized I could not tell whether the quiet was waiting or watching. I thought leaving the attic would break the thread. Instead, it tightened until it cut. The next morning, the house felt smaller, as if every surface leaned in to hear me breathe. I walked through rooms I had already inspected and found them different. Chairs angled where I'd never put them. A smear of something dark on the underside of the kitchen table that smelled faintly of iron. My phone would not hold a charge. It blinked low even when plugged in. Pictures I took showed a smear of grainy shadow where no shadow should be, and in the reflection of a window, I could have sworn I saw the poster standing behind me, its head cocked in patient curiosity. People I called answered like they were breathing through a pillow. My sister said I sounded off, and then asked abruptly if I had been wearing dark clothes lately. My neighbor, a woman who remembered the house's old owner, refused to go into the attic, and her eyes slid off mine whenever I tried to press her for stories. The memory of a conversation with her dissolved around the edges. She said something about they and not looking, and then laughed like someone trying to prove they weren't afraid. Her laugh tasted of pennies in my mouth afterward. The poster became a map in my daily life. I would pass a mirror and feel the tug at the back of my head, the same slow, involuntary turn in the attic, and find my eyes tracking toward an empty corner as if there were a seam there that only I could see. At night, the house rearranged itself in my dreams, and the dreams bled into noon like ink into water. Once, in the bathroom, I looked into the mirror and watched my own eyes grow dull, the irises clouding over as if someone were sanding the glass smooth. I slammed my palms to the sink, and the water ran red for a breathless second, then clear. I told myself I was losing it, that stress and solitude made the mind do cruel cartwheels. That lie lasted 3 days. Then I found the letters. They were tucked beneath the trapdoor in the attic, crumpled, browned pages tied with string. The handwriting was small and hurried, and then slashed through as if the writer had been interrupted. "Don't look," one line read, the ink pressed so deeply the paper tore. Another note, more recent, ended mid-sentence. "Now it knows my name. I can feel," and nothing more. There were photographs folded in the bundle, faces I almost recognized, a man with his head bowed, a little girl with a missing tooth, a neighbor whose smile had been stitched out with a dark marker. On the back of some photos, the same two words were stamped, as if to brand them: "Don't look." That night, the house hummed like a throat. I could hear the poster's voice without a sound, a soft static that suggested meaning if I let it unfurl. It wasn't words at first, just a pressure behind my eyelids, a script forming in the air where my vision blurred. Then it sharpened into commands that tasted like ash. I tried to sleep, and the face in the attic crawled into the corners of every closed eye. I woke to the feeling of someone having been very close to my face, very recently. The sheet beside me was warm and pressed down, but no one lay there. My hands went to my eyes, and I felt something cold and papery under each eyelid, like flaked paint. I began to dream with my mouth open, and wake with the impression of having listened to someone recite my life back to me. The longer I stayed, the clearer the lines became. Patterns of movement I could not control, the way my head would tilt in crowded places, the way my fingers would brush surfaces as if reading Braille. It was no longer the poster watching me, it was teaching me to watch. When the light went out for good, it did so like a promise broken, slow, inevitable, the bulbs dimming as if someone had folded the world into paper. I had packed a bag once, 2 shirts, my wallet, a flashlight with dead batteries, and hidden the key where the house could not find it. I thought leaving would be a clean cut. It was not. The front door opened onto the same corridor I had walked 1,000 times, but each step left a print of cold behind me, a map that led not away but inward. The house had grown teeth. I tried to burn the poster. Matches flared in my hands and died like little ghosts. The frame would not come loose. My fingers slid on the varnish as if through oil. I struck the glass with the heel of my hand and felt, with a clarity that made my stomach turn, the resistance of something that was not glass but membrane. A spider web of hairline cracks spread outward, and the face behind them smiled wider, as if the fractures only improved its view. I left a note in the kitchen for whoever might come, a scrawl that said run or leave or something, but the paper was folded when I found it again, the words smoothed out as if read and then ironed by an invisible palm. The photographs in the attic multiplied. New faces arrived in the bundle overnight. People I had passed in the street, the woman who lived 2 doors down, my sister, everyone whose eye had lingered in the wrong place. Their smiles were gone, the mouths scored with black like someone had tried to erase what had looked back. The nights became a geometry of terror. I would wake to find my pillow gone and a circle imprinted in the mattress as if a face had left its imprint. Once, I found myself at the window watching the road with 2 teaspoons balanced in my hands, and I had no memory of why. My hands moved on their own, following the choreography the house had taught them. Tilt, listen, look where it told me to. When I resisted, nausea rose like old coins in my throat. When I obeyed, the room filled with a perfume of church flowers and decay that made me weep without sound. On the last night, I could remember making a choice. I stood before the poster, palms pressed to the frame, and I whispered every desperate thing I had left in me. Apologies, names, pleas, like a man bargaining with a blade. The face leaned in closer than any human could. The eyes were not eyes, but hollows that swallowed the candle flame. For an instant, there was a warmth against my forehead, a soft pressure like a hand, and behind it, the sensation of being photographed from the inside. I am not certain whether I closed my eyes or they closed me. There is a moment I can still taste, metallic and sweet, when the world flipped like a page. When I opened, or when the house opened me, the attic light showed a new poster framed on the opposite wall. The letters were the same, weathered and blood dark. Between them, in the margin, someone had written in a tiny, trembling hand. I tried to leave. I ran my fingers over the margin and felt my own name wet and fresh beneath the ink. I am the warning.
Subscribe to Horror Story Books.